So it starts with, I bet you Everett's going to have stuff to say this week. So uh, it starts with making an altar of earth. So this is the first blush of we started with the Ten Commandments we ended it with the Ten Commandments last week, and it gets to the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, and Yahweh goes, and then the people go, we can't take it anymore, right? We don't, you stop talking, we can't do it anymore. And now we need Moses to go intercede for us, right? Now they quit too soon because the next information, lots easier than the first information, right? You're going to make an altar of earth for me. How hard is that, right? That's not hard at all. And so this didn't go away, by the way. The altar of earth, even though as we fast forward, spoiler alert, they're still going to disobey and they're still going to end up with a Levitical priesthood, right? Same cycle every year. When they, but this altar didn't get replaced with the Levitical priesthood. So David does this later in 1 Chronicles 21, 18 through 26. So even though the Levitical priesthood got installed after the golden calf incident, Israel was still allowed and expected to make these spontaneous altars where they would just take a large stone and lay it down and it wouldn't be cut. So he says, if you make an altar of stone, you shall not build it out of cut stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you will profane it. What is the greater message there? Anybody? Well, Corky's got an answer. Says, last week you spoke of Yahweh making himself known to other peoples like Moses' father-in-law. Also in Deuteronomy chapter 2, we see where God had given different lands to at least 3 different peoples, and the Israelites were told not to bother them. It's true. The Bible is overall Yahweh's interaction with mankind, recorded, Genesis to Revelation. Then as we zero in, he's really focused on Israel. But we also see, like Jethro was a worshiper of Yahweh who was not part of Israel. So we have to imagine, what did the rest of the world look like during this time frame? When the Israelites come in to Canaan to smite them for idolatry, right? He's not punishing them for something that they didn't know better, right? He's not an arbitrary punisher. If he's coming to punish them for doing wicked deeds, they probably at some point in time knew better and fell away. And so Jethro was not an idolater, and he was called the priest of Midian. But we don't know what the priest of Midian believed, because the Bible is focused almost exclusively, the Old Testament is focused on Israel. So we focus it on that. But just so Corky was reminding me that, what about the other people, right? Because Abraham had other children, stayed behind, right? And the Edomites, they become bad guys because they were always heckling Israel. But you got to wonder if there were other good guys. And so this altar of stone, you don't build it or cut stones. The greater message there is, we can't make things better than Yahweh. Somebody have something to say? Anne-Marie? No? Everett?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't see you.
Yeah. It's of course, when the altar before the tabernacle was built, they had to use tools to put it together. So it required a 7-day purification period, whereas this altar could be built and used immediately. It was inherently pure because, like you say, God makes things and they're good. As it is. But the neat thing about this altar is that he would come to them and bless them. Yeah. The use of this altar, they didn't have to go to him. They didn't have to go anywhere as far as that goes. which is a totally different relationship than what was established with the Levitical system. These altars were allowed, but there were special circumstances that caused them to be made. At least the only place that I've seen recorded was the special circumstances where it was a direct connection between the one who was offering and the Creator himself. There was the Levites did not use these altars.
Yep. Yeah, all true. So there's a joke, an old joke, is that Satan goes up to Yahweh and says, "Hey, I think I can make man better than you." Yahweh says, "Okay, get your own dirt." Right? Because Yahweh formed man out of the dust of the ground, right? Yahweh made everything. So we can't, is what mankind is just insistent on, is trying to make us better than what Yahweh made us to be. But that's kind of a sinful attitude. That's an arrogant attitude, saying that we know better than the one who created us. The pot doesn't get to tell the potter how it was made. And if we surrender to Yahweh and understand that he has a place for all of us, and he has a place for this earth, and he has a place for things, and he has given us stewardship over it, that's a different relationship than trying to, enhance, trying to get immortality through scientific means, right? That's us trying to say that we know better, which we don't. It's a humility thing. You don't make it better, because if, and this is where the spawn of idolatry is when the people decided to make idols and put tools to the rock, then the rock all of a sudden takes on more of a religious, takes on a religious meaning when it's not supposed to. The sacrifice on the rock is the holy part, not the rock. And so I'm not really explaining it very good, but you don't try to make it better. You respect what Yahweh has made and come with a humble offering. And that's the way it ought to be. But there's a bigger picture there of us trying not to exceed our own place. Go ahead.
But it's all natural. All natural. It's pure its form.
Right.
So it's how it came, how it was built. You don't alter it, basically.
Yeah, he formed the heavens and the earth. And the earth, when we say that, we think in our brains the big blue marble, right? But the earth is also the word eretz, which means the dry ground and the rocks and the firm stuff that we stand on. He formed it. So if we use it as is, we're respecting his sovereignty. Okay. And if you go up, you don't go up your steps to his altar so that your nakedness will not be exposed upon it. It's interesting how the very common sense commandments are mixed in with these other things that are so esoteric to us, right? Apparently they all wore like skirts, and they had to be humble, and they robes and things of the like. So, Everett?
Yeah, as I understand it, they didn't wear what we consider to be underwear at all. So that would have changed the equation a little bit. But one other thing about this altar of earth or uncut stones, you sacrifice your burnt offerings and your peace offerings. It doesn't mention anything about sin offerings. And there again, this is a direct connection between the offerer and his creator, that they have a connection. Sin separates us.
Yes.
And so it's incompatible with a sin offering.
All right. Sounds good to me. So we go to 21, and these are the ordinances which you were set to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th he shall go out as a free man without payment. If he comes out alone, he shall go out alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons and daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife and my children, I will not go out as a free man, then his master shall bring him to Elohim, and he shall bring him to the door of the doorpost. His master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him permanently. The slave stuff is kind of strange to us, but this isn't the slavery that the United States had or that the Muslims have today. The Muslims have slaves and they treat people like animals. And that's what the United States did. Clearly, this slavery relationship here wasn't permanent, and it was a good enough life that a man who was a slave could get married and have a family. That's odd, don't you think? I mean, that you think of a slave, you think of somebody who's constantly in service to his master, but this person in this situation would be able to actually have a life, and that it would be not such a bad life that he might decide to stay. That doesn't make sense to me. Does it to you?
Treat like family, basically.
Mm-hmm. They become part of the family.
Yeah, the slave master relationship, we've had a bad introduction to it. And even in the United States, I don't think it was quite as bad as what the reputation has for it. I visited Andrew Jackson's plantation in Tennessee, and he had slave quarters. They were like duplexes, one-room duplexes. I don't know, quite some distance from the main house, but there were evidently families that lived out there. They found coins when in the area when they came through decades later and investigated to see what this was like, and they evidently weren't nearly so poorly treated as the reputation that slavery has gotten. It only makes sense that if you've got somebody working for you, you don't want to be sick all the time or laid up because he's been beaten. It just doesn't make any sense at all. But they evidently, Andrew Jackson's plantation anyway, they had little parties and that sort of stuff out in their vicinity, and it wasn't nearly so bad. I visited Africa about the same time, and let me tell you, I would prefer the slave quarters of Andrew Jackson to some of the homes that I saw people living in Africa.
All right, so Everett's on record to saying that American slavery wasn't that bad. Good luck.
Yeah, well, I know I'm fighting a losing battle, and obviously there were some things that were not done right at all,
Yeah.
and it has a bad reputation, but it was not intended that way at all by the creator.
But this is.
Can I say something?
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Before slavery in the United States, they did have people that served for 7 years. That it's an indentured servant. They had indentured servants before the slaves, and they basically, the owners would pay their wages up, pay their way over to the New World, and then they'd have to serve 7 years to pay off their debt. Now, of course, there was some abuse in that area too, but that was before slavery.
Yep, that's true. There were indentured servitudes and stuff. Okay,
Kevin's
got something. Go ahead, Everett.
Well, there's another aspect to this that I think is really important. It mentions if a master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and the man goes out alone. The slave, when he was a slave anyway, was an extension of the master. It was as if whatever he did was the doing of the master.
Yeah.
And in our relationship with our Creator, he made us, he owns us, we are his slaves. He treats us very well, but everything we do reflects on the master. And that could be a scary thought, what kind of reputation are we creating for our Creator?
All right, Kevin.
One thing I noticed was like, I don't know if it was Anne-Marie talking, or Terry, she
Terry.
said about the 7 years. So I noticed like in the Old Testament where when Moses had freed the slaves, the Egyptians gave them a lot of whatever they owned. And then you have the story with Rebecca and
Laban.
Laban.
Yeah.
Yeah. He worked for 7 years and obviously didn't marry the wife that he was looking to marry. He had to work another 7 years. So there was always something. It was an indentured servant thing. The U.S. there was no indentured servants. So when the blacks were freed, they had to figure out their own lives. And I mean, doing a little bit of research, like the reason why the ghettos were so bad is because people had to do whatever they had to do until they could afford what they could afford. If America had kept with how they were supposed to treat their slaves, it wouldn't the cities wouldn't be as bad and the ghettos wouldn't be as bad. So
Yeah, the big difference here is that this is a somebody has fallen on such a hard time that they get bought for 7 years and they have the option to leave and they're treated pretty okay. But in the U.S. slavery, that wasn't a thing, and they were just permanent slaves treated. It was not like that at all. And when they freed the slaves, one of the reasons for the 14th Amendment, but the way this is something I studied 20 years old or whatever, the slave owners and the politicians immediately forbade black people from learning how to fence and from owning weapons. When they were freed, they didn't want them to be able to defend themselves so they could continue abusing them. So the 14th Amendment was passed to extend the Bill of Rights to the freed slaves to make them whole citizens so that they could have the same rights as everybody else here. That, in this case, there's a very specific set of time, very specific instances that people have to follow to treat their slaves in Torah, very different from the United States. The United States got out of hand. I mean, I'm sure there were some places where it was better than others, but the 3/5 rule in the Constitution was to prevent the southern states from being able to buy enough people that they could overwhelm the House of Representatives and control the government. So that's, if you didn't know that, that's why they called slaves 3/5 of a person, because at that number, if the southern politicians tried to buy enough people to be able to take over the U.S. government, they would have been overwhelmed with slaves and they would have freed themselves by the simple fact that there would have been too many of them, to control. So yeah, something near and dear to my heart. I really am an equal rights kind of guy. And yeah, and so the slavery in the U.S. wasn't like this, even though they used the Bible to justify it, right? And Rosa Parks, hundreds of years later, had to stand up and to sit in the front of that bus and say, you know better. She quoted, there's neither Jew nor Greek nor slave nor free, we're all one in Jesus Christ. And they were all convicted of making black people sit in the back of the bus. And that was what brought about the civil rights movement, was the Bible. And it was preachers, ministers who were out there getting hit with the fire hose in order to put that stuff behind us, So, but that's not about Torah. That's just me talking about history. Gloria, what's up?
In in this case too, if you think about a man going in to become a slave, and I always thought that this was unfair, but in thinking about it the other day, for him to go out without his wife, but if he has not taken care of a wife before, then this is actually a mercy for him, because it's the master that knows how to take care of the family and the group. And so this is a good thing for the slave's wife and children. She's being taken care of by the master, not necessarily by her slave husband. And so if he hasn't grown to become that type of a master type person to actually be able to take care of his family, this is a protection for that wife and children of them. And so for him to then stay with the family, and to be the slave, I think. And I'm sure that this was used to quote unquote entrap the slave to stay with them as well. And so that, that I'm sure that this was misused. And having grown up in the northern states and now living in the southern states, I have a very different view of the things that I had been taught growing up in the northern states. There's much more to the story of the stuff that happened here in the United States, and I'll leave it at that.
All righty. Corky says, we have conflated slavery with only bad, but there were also a lot of whites, and he agrees with Terry. All right. Okay. If a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. If he designate her for his son, then he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, clothing, or conjugal rights. If he will not do these three things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. This is a foreign concept to us, to have women treated differently like this, but there is a lot of justice here. And there's a lot of saying that a wealthy man can't just go buying women and treating them however he wants to treat them. That if he doesn't take care of her, then she gets to go out free without penalty or anything, which is an incentive for him to treat her properly. And yeah. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lay in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint a place to which you may flee. Our system of punishment in the U.S. today with jailing and stuff like that didn't exist in Torah times. They had manslaughter rules, they had restitution rules. We're about to go through all that. But I don't see a place in the Bible where people get locked up. You guys see that? I don't see any locked up. I see no jail cells. If you did something bad enough to be locked up, they just killed you. Right? Right? And that's a pretty big incentive to be good, right?
Unless you consider the cities of refuge to be locked up.
Yeah. That's true. That was kind of a lockup. Everett?
Yeah, actually, in the beginnings of this country, jail was not the first
Option
for a criminal. I visited Williamsburg, and they said, well, when they caught a thief or something like that, they had this little, it wasn't much bigger than an outhouse, and they put him in there for a day or two until the judge came by, and then they would execute whatever sentence that was determined on him, whether it be beatings or forced labor for an extended period of time. That extended time in prison was considered cruel and unusual punishment.
Wow. All right. And this is talking about a lot of Bibles and a lot of Ten Commandments say the commandment is thou shalt not kill, but it's thou shalt not murder, because obviously they had to put people to death for punishment. They had to defend themselves and they had to fight wars. So it wasn't kill. And this is explaining what murder versus manslaughter is in brief. If a man acts presumptuously towards his neighbor so as to kill him craftily, you shall take him even from my altar that he may die. So premeditated murder is really bad in the eyes of Yahweh. And that's Cain and Abel. It's going to come up a couple times today. And that's what happened. When Cain slew Abel, it was pure premeditated murder and very bad. He who strikes his father or mother shall surely be put to death. Boy, do we need to bring that one back. I'm just saying. The kids don't even know who their dad is, right? You know, and the breakdown of the family is so bad. Now, for those of us in this walk, a lot of us have had to do what Abraham did. Okay, Dad, I'm not going to be an idolater anymore. You good with that? Right, right. We've had to break from our families. I've had to break from mine because they, you know, some of you have breaking with your contemporary families, which is very heart-wrenching to have to choose God, you know, like so stark, right? And my parents made it. This was years ago, but they made it an issue, and I had to tell them no, but the disrespecting, I didn't disrespect them. I still honor them as my parents, but I'm like, I'm sorry, but God is more important than you. And I got to do what the Bible says, not what you say. He who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or is found with him, shall surely be put to death. We call this one the Joseph clause, because Joseph got sold off into slavery by his own brothers. It's terrible. He who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. So Yahweh is really interested in the family unit being together. And when it's not, it's a problem. And, you know, for us, you know, my parents raised 6 of their own and my brother's 2, but they weren't very good parents. And it was very chaotic and always yelling and always bad. And we came out here to break with the chaos of my family so that our kids would have a different path. And it worked. Because our kids didn't have the strife that my family did. Although they got to visit it once in a while. And they were like, wow, these people are messed up. Right? So if I'm sure the same story is for all of you all, but my parents they would have preferred that Diana and I be drug addicts and going to Catholic church than be the nuclear family and keeping the Sabbath and the holy days. They would have completely been better if we were to have stayed in the church and been losers rather than follow Yahweh and raise our kids right and have our little house on the prairie. And I don't know. That's not the way to be, but I still respect them. In fact, I'm my dad's caregiver to this day. So I'll be seeing him tomorrow. And if men have a quarrel, one strikes another with a stone or his fist, and he does not die, but remains in bed. If he gets up and walks around outside on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He shall only pay for his loss of time, and he shall take care of him until he's completely healed. Now, this is assuming a righteous people. This is assuming people of fear God and walk rightfully. What would happen if we had this law today? Right? What does happen today? If somebody slips and falls in the store, and they try to get sued and trying to get paid, right? And this case, the guy who got struck is, if he can get up out of bed, he has to get up out of bed, right? He doesn't get to stay in bed and try to get this, you know, try to make the other guy look bad or put on the fake neck brace, you know what I mean? Like they do in the movies. And if he gets up, walks around, he only pays for his loss of time and takes care of him until he's healed. This is restitution. Making somebody whole again is just, and maybe add 20% for their troubles. But today, people are always trying to get rich when something bad happens to them, not trying to get made whole again. And that's a problem. Not people like us, of course. We live like this in a world that doesn't, right? If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property. So, Everett, tell me again how this slavery was a good idea.
Well, to a certain degree, things are relative. This is, as far as a person being punished because he killed his slave, this was a big breakthrough for slavery during that time. But he is his property. He evidently bought him for whatever reason, and the purpose was to support him, the slave, make the slave capable of caring for himself and or being of value to his master. And so the master is being punished by the disappearance, the removal of the slave. We'll see in a little while that if he even breaks a tooth, he's of Hebrew slave, I presume, he's to let him go free. So the slave began to have rights with this particular instruction, which is not the way it was, generally speaking.
Well, it's the contrast to how they were treated in Egypt. So it's definitely an improvement. And when Kevin was talking about the restitution, when Israel spoiled Egypt on the way out, they were getting paid for all the years of unpaid labor. They were getting paid back. And when we look at the building of the tabernacle, first we look at the golden calf incident, where they had enough gold to make this idol, right? But then later, when they're building the tabernacle, they have so much gold and so much wealth that they didn't give to Aaron when he was making the golden calf. There's far more righteous people than unrighteous at that point. But they had so much stuff that Moses had to say, stop giving it to us. We have too much. And so they left Egypt with enough wealth to become a country. And that is part of the miracle of it. And they got paid back for their slavery.
There's another aspect to this slave dying after a while. The master was responsible for punishing a slave when he did not, live up to what the master's expectations were. Of course, that's sort of the opposite of the slave being an extension of the master, that he got the benefit of the slave, but he was responsible for the slave's actions as well in the same case. And so I presume in this particular case, if he survives a day or two, that it could very well be that the master was punished the slave somehow or another, did not intend to kill him. If he had intended to kill him, he would have died right away, in which case he needed to be punished because that was unacceptable. But if he survived for a day or two, the assumption would be he punished him, but he didn't intend to kill him. And he's suffering the loss because of his over enthusiasm to punish.
But just not beating people. Just saying. If men struggle with each other and strike a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet there is no injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay double as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint a penalty, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he shall let him go free on account of his eye. And if he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let him go free on account of his tooth. So this is not, as Yeshua said, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I'm telling you, turn the other cheek. You didn't have to do it, right? You didn't have to demand restitution. If somebody did you wrong, you could forgive them and turn the other cheek and not punish them. And in this case of the birth of the baby prematurely, how hard was it in this country for us to get that put into law? That while I was alive, when I was, 10 or 11 or whatever, this was the opposite. That if somebody robbed a bank and they harmed a woman and she miscarried, then there was not considered a life. In this country, the baby was not considered a life. Okay. That became a law in the past 30 years or so. But it's right here. Thought this country was built by people who read the Bible, right? Obviously, if a woman has another life inside of her, that's a life. That's not a thing. It's a life. And so, but we had to actually fight to get that put into law here. Everett?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. This eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand. That was with the judges standing by. What Yeshua was talking about was somebody taking this responsibility upon himself and saying, hey, this guy did me wrong, so therefore I'm going to do him wrong. And there's a difference, I think, from what Yeshua was talking about, where vigilanteism or somebody deciding for themselves to wreak vengeance. But in this particular case, there was a judge standing by, and he was to make the decision. And particularly with the premature birth, the husband was to have a direct say as to what the penalty would be in that particular case. So that was a factor as well in the decision.
Good point, Everett. Judge not lest ye be judged. God still does what he wants. Yeah. So the principle, most of Christianity quotes the passage, do not judge, judge not lest ye be judged, as if to say we're not allowed to judge. The next verse says, for in the way you judge, you will be judged. So it's talking about this principle. As we measure other people, so Yahweh will measure us come judgment day. And as we judge others in matters of crime, in matters of being slighted, in matters of business, or who we're going to hang out with, then our standard is going to come back on us. It's a big warning against hypocrisy. And in this case here, this eye for eye, tooth for a tooth, I think this was always intended to establish a principle and not be perfectly literal, right? If you lose an eyeball, right? Say in some industrial accident, you lose an eyeball. Okay? What good is it served if you pluck out your boss's eyeball? Nobody is served. That's not good. There's no reason for this, right? If you lost the eyeball, you get the patch, and you go, oh, that's terrible. That's too bad. I lost an eyeball, right? But you don't go and get all like I want everybody to wear patches now, right? That's a bad way of thinking. And so we shouldn't think about it that way. In modern society, if you may know this, you may not know this. I bet you Tiffany does. Waking her up. Hey. Right? Every body part that we have has a financial value according to insurance companies, disability insurance companies and life insurance companies and stuff. If you lose a hand, there's an actual monetary compensation for that, because our society is based on money, not on goods and stuff. And so that's part of this principle here as well, that that if you lose your ability to work, if you lose your ability to actually make a living, then whoever did that to you is now responsible for your well-being for the rest of your life. Nothing wrong with that, but it is an incentive to have a safe workplace and to behave properly. Everett?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it shouldn't necessarily be considered literal, but it's intended to accentuate the fact that it needs to be equal somehow or another. Now, who decides that? Of course, that's why the judge is involved, you know. But yeah, it's intending an equivalent or appropriate punishment. It's not intending physically to go, you know, pull your boss's eyeball out. Absolutely.
Right. It's no good. And then what if he does it twice? Right? No. Yeah, right. It's no good. If a man strikes an eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he shall let him go free on account of his eye. If he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let him go free on account of his tooth. Okay, you get your freedom, right? And so what's that saying is, don't strike your slaves, right? Don't do that. If you do, there's a risk involved that you're about to set them free. If an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall go unpunished. However, if an ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, yet he does not confine it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death. Yeah, I agree with that. Right? We have to be responsible, and we have to, this is part of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You can't have an animal around that's, can hurt somebody. You just can't. Same thing with the mitzvot, the commandments about putting up fencing around the top of houses. As you can see, it's here on this thing. There's a safety fencing on the parapet so that people can't fall off of it. If they didn't put that on their house and people fell off, it was the responsibility of the homeowner. These are really common sense things. And I really think the Hebrews really blew it when they said, Moses, mediate for us, because this is what was coming, and it's not that bad, right? This is a good way to live, right? Is to tell people that they have to be responsible for their stuff. And today, the way this applies today in our society is, years ago, Ford Explorers were flipping over all the time, right? Well, Ford had to pay people back for that. I've had a couple of plane crashes recently. People have to get paid back for the harm that has caused. Those poor people that died over the Potomac, the airlines are going to have to really come up with something special for them, and the helicopter pilots. And then the thing in Canada last week, do you guys see that? I mean, you didn't see it? But airplane landed and flipped over, landed on its back in Toronto. Yeah. Yeah. Todd was actually in Thailand. He flew from Kansas City to Seattle to Korea to Bangkok to his now sister-in-law's place. The return voyage was that city to Bangkok to Korea to Atlanta to Kansas City. That's a lot of airplanes while they're all falling out of the sky, Yeah. This week I stayed at a hotel near the Des Moines airport because I drove there to meet my employees, and I was in the shower and I heard some whining and rumbling outside, and I immediately thought that building was about to get hit with a plane. I was like, do I need to take cover? Right? We're laughing. This is not a good time to be in the air. And so, if a ransom is demanded of him, then he shall give the redemption of his life. Whether it gores a son or a daughter, it should be done according to the same rule. If it gores a male or female slave, the owner shall give his or her master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. All right. You know how long it would take to kill an ox with rocks? Man, I don't. I don't have a clue. Uh, if a man opens, I mean, because you imagine like a horse. You ever rode a horse? It doesn't even know you're on it. Ox is bigger than a horse, right? I mean, how are you going to hit an ox hard enough with a rock to, I don't know, right? I guess. If a man opens a pit, digs a pit, doesn't cover it, pardon? Ask David to do it. Yeah, there you go. Oh, well, this is the part of you don't make it safe or a donkey falls into it, then you have to pay for the donkey. If one man's ox hurts another so that it dies, they shall sell the live ox and divide the price equally. That's just fair. You know, if it's known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, yet the owner has not confined it, he shall pay ox for ox. So now it's 22. I guess it's 23 is where I was going to get to the good stuff. No, I'm not. It's all good. But, if a man steals an ox or a sheep or slaughters it and sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If the thief is caught while breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there will be no blood guiltiness on his account. That's another thing that we had to get put into law in this country just in the last 20 years. It was literally, if somebody broke in your house and you shot them, you were going to jail and you had to prove yourself innocent, right? And here it is in the Bible, right? No. That's not right. The sun, yeah, there'll be no blood guiltiness if the sun rises.
I was gonna say, if it's daylight though, it's different than nighttime.
Oh, yeah, because you can see them.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he stole what is found in his possession, he shall pay double. If the man lets a vineyard be grazed bare, and lets his animal loose so it grazes another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field, the best of his own vineyard. Yeah, you're absolutely stealing that other man's livelihood. You know, he needs his field for his cattle. You can't be stealing that food. That's not right. If a fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes so that stacked grain or the standing grain of the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall surely make restitution. Yep. Good luck, California. How many billions of dollars are caught up in smoke, Everett?
This is all about personal responsibility, which, in my mind, seems like it's out of style in the world today that I live in. We're always trying to blame somebody else. It's not my fault. My parents spanked me when I was a kid or something. I don't know what it is, but everybody finds an excuse to try to blame somebody else. But there's a whole lot of personal responsibility here that we need to step up to the plate and realize that we have a responsibility to everyone around us.
All right.
It's restitution to the person who's actually being hurt, not to the state. And because now we've got the state that's gotten involved, and we pay now. There's restitution to the state or community service or something along those lines. But the judges are to hold the people accountable, according to Exodus, to hold the people accountable for the person who's actually been hurt, not the state. And so.
Yeah, you're right. And Gloria is on to something else as well, is that today, if you get caught polluting as industrial pollution, you have to pay to clean it up and you have to pay a fine to the federal government. What does the fine to the federal government have to do with anything, right? The state just gets paid because it exists, right? That doesn't make sense. God's way will still be fair, even if businesses aren't. God will create restitution where other people do it or not. Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely, and we're storing up treasures in heaven. That's why if you get harmed in this life, and Yeshua wants us to turn the other cheek, because like the biggest examples of this are the ends of wars. the end of the U.S. Civil War, we had to have Reconstruction and the families had to reunite. So you have to let bygones be bygones, or you'll be at war for the rest of your life. Same with the end of World War II. We had to defeat the Japanese and the Germans, and the Japanese got their country back. And it's a fine country to this day because you have to let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, everybody is at each other's throats continually and feeling entitled. And Everett?
There's one thing, well, you're absolutely right about, yeah. Well, it's like when the thief has to pay back double or whatever, the law is served and everybody moves on. But as far as the pollution and the fee to the government, you can't really decide who is going to be affected, directly by the pollution, in every single case. Some are affected more, some are less, some may not be affected at all. In that particular case, I think it may be appropriate to pay a fee to the government, the theory being that all the citizens benefit from however the government ends up using that money to maybe clean up the pollution or prevent pollution in some other way.
All right. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him and it is stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. If the thief is not caught, then the owner of the house shall appear before the judges to determine whether he's laid his hands on his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is ox, donkey, sheep, clothing, any lost thing, which one says this is it, in the case both parties shall come before the judges. He whom the judges condemn shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives his neighbor a donkey, a sheep, or any animal, and it dies or is hurt or is driven away while no one's looking, an oath before Yahweh shall be made by the two of them that he has not laid hands on his neighbor's property, and its owner shall accept it, and he shall not make restitution. So this is these people understanding that they'll be judged by a higher power. This is part of why our politicians are supposed to swear in with their hand on the Bible and swear an oath to God, because when you get that kind of power, you have to understand that you will be judged at some point in time on how you use that power. And that's to put the fear of God in people when they make these oaths. But if it is stolen, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it's torn to pieces, let him bring it as evidence. If a man borrows anything from his neighbor, its injured dies, he shall make full restitution. The owner is with it, he shall not make restitution. It all seems simple. If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. Yeah. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry for virgins. You shall not allow a sorceress to live. Well, how's about them apples, right? All these other ones are ifs and this and that, and the other, and then we just get this one dropped on us. Now, what did King Saul do? He went to a sorceress. He lost his anointing and he completely broke the entire commandments in order to try to keep his power. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. Yeah, we need to bring that one back. He who sacrifices to any god other than Yahweh alone shall be utterly destroyed. Yep. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. It's another love your neighbor as yourself passage, right? The Israelites were afflicted for hundreds of years, so you don't go and do that to other people. This is a problem I had in the Navy, because the Navy, if somebody had it bad, had something bad, then they made you go through the same bad experience. I've never understood that. If I have a hard time fixing something at work, or if I have a hard trouble, I want to tell everybody, hey, don't do this. So you go make your own mistakes, right? But these are rites of passages. Afflicting people just because you were afflicted is opposite thinking. right? We want to be merciful people, not vengeance people. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. That goes without saying. If you afflict him at all, or he does cry out to me, I will hear it, and my anger will be kindled, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you are not to act as a creditor to him. You shall not charge him interest. Wow. Could you imagine if we got rid of interest in this country? Could you imagine that? Yeah. It would be good, I think. If you ever take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you are to return it to him before the sun sets, for that is his only covering. If it is his cloak for his body, what else shall he sleep in? And it shall come about when he cries out to me, and I hear him, for I am gracious. So you shall not curse God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay the offering from your harvest and your vintage. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days. On the 8th day you give it to me. You shall be holy men to me, for you are not to eat any flesh torn from the pieces of the field, and you shall throw it to the dogs. So this is establishing holiness here. And the part about being holy is pretty important. And if you notice, it hinges on what we eat. A lot of people look at us like, oh, you could eat any old thing. Jesus got rid of that, that. But if holiness is established by your diet, it's not established. It's a reflection of your character if you decide to do what the Bible says to do. And, one time hit it. Oh, Ever, go ahead. You probably have a better thing.
Yeah, this law is pretty all-encompassing, but it doesn't specifically mention unclean food. But
Yeah.
in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, where it talks about what is clean and what is unclean, in the same breath, it talks about you shall be holy men to me. And so absolutely,
Yes,
being holy is a matter of mind and body. And to make your body holy, you got to eat decent food. How well do we represent our Creator when we're sick?
Yep. I was with a coworker once, and we hit a deer in the middle of the night in Iowa. He was driving my company car, and that car was never the same. But the police came and they said, "Do you want the deer?" I'm like, what would I possibly do with the deer? People eat them. People eat roadkill. We're not supposed to eat roadkill. You're not supposed to eat things that die, that are torn to pieces, or die of themselves. You're not supposed to eat that. And my coworker was Hindu, by the way. He was really distraught. He made us go back to the site the next day and put flowers because he thought he killed a family member. Poor guy. Yeah. You shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not follow the masses in doing evil, nor shall you just testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. And then I also want to tie that to verses 7 and 8. Keep far from a false charge. Do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not acquit the guilty. You shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the just. Did anybody read the New Testament part this week and figure out where I was going with that? No. Anybody? Well, then let's go there. I didn't write it there. Luke something. Luke 22:66. Oh, Terry?
I was just going to say, I read it, but I didn't get the correlation. Sorry.
What did the council do to kill the Messiah? False witnesses galore. They bribed Judas. They had false witnesses. And Pontius Pilate gave the Messiah up for death because the people were chanting, crucify him, thus following the masses in doing evil. When they crucified Yeshua, they broke all of the Torah, all of it. And they wanted him dead so bad that they were blind rage to try to kill him. They were trying to do it premeditated from the day he started preaching. The day he started preaching, they were trying to find something wrong, right? And they were trying to build a case with him for years. When they finally bring him in, they are trying to get false witnesses, and they get the people to stand outside of the praetorium and say, we have no king but Caesar. The people gave up their birthright to kill the Messiah. And so the Torah, when we read it in the new, in its context, it's good and it works. Should we live the way that we just read? Yes, and we do, right? Even though we're in a messed up world, we live the way the Torah says. But its application to the New Testament and what happens later is why we're in this walk, right? When we understand the whole Bible and understand the gravity of the situation when they tried to kill Yeshua and the sin that they committed, when later, Acts 2, when Peter says, this Jesus whom you crucified, whom God raised from the dead, is why we're standing here. The people know they're guilty because they knew the Torah. They knew they followed the masses into evil. They knew that they had the false witnesses. They knew they put an innocent man to death. And they say, what do we do? And he says, repent and be baptized in the name of Yeshua, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. So we read the Torah, and it's in its context is great. But now, in the greater context of what's been revealed in the New Testament, it's very eye-opening that these people, no king but Caesar, that's quite a break of covenant. I've often wondered if they realize they need Yeshua now. Well, I believe they realized it when Peter got the Holy Spirit. When Peter and the guys got the Holy Spirit and they were testifying, the people that killed him were there. We see 5,000 people baptized in one day, 3,000 people baptized in another. Peter and John went into the temple and they started preaching. They went up to the Sanhedrin and they started preaching, and they were condemning all of them for breaking their own law. What did we read? By your standard, you will be measured. Do not judge, for you will be judged, for in the way you judge, you will be judged. All of the people that follow the masses into doing evil are guilty of it, and they're guilty of death when the Messiah returns. Yeah. So when it was day, the council and the elders of the people assembled, both the chief priests and the scribes, and led him away to their council chamber, saying, if you are the Messiah, tell us. But he said, if I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. And they said, are you the Son of God then? He said, yes, I am. Well, what further need do we have of testimony? For we have heard it from our own mouth. He was the Son of God. He was the son of David by both parents, or all three parents, if you count Yahweh, right? By Joseph, by Mary. He was the son of David. He was that. And they killed him innocently, breaking the Torah that we just read. Then the whole body of them got up and brought him before Pilate. The masses were leading them into evil. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man misleading our nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. So Pilate asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, uh-huh. Because he was, right? He was the heir to the throne. Still is, right? Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, he's like, I don't find any guilt in this man. Pilate is more righteous than the people with the Torah. That's a sad commentary. But they kept on listening, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching all over Judea, starting in Galilee, even as far as this place. When Pilate heard it, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that, he brought to Herod's jurisdiction. He sent him to Herod, who himself was in Jerusalem at that time. Herod was glad that he saw Yeshua, for he wanted to see him for a long time because he had been hearing about him. and was hoping to see some sign performed by him. And he questioned him at some length, and he answered him nothing. The chief priests and scribes were standing there accusing him vehemently. The crowd is stirring up the people. Do we see this in our world today? I've never seen anything like what's happening in our world today, where people are getting whipped up into frenzy, maybe 2 or 3 frenzies a day over misinformation, bad information. That's not how we're supposed to judge things. The way the Torah is set up is that if something bad happens, you stop, you investigate. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall everything be established, whether something's true or not. Okay, somebody did some wrong, and the punishment's pretty cinchy. You make a restitution. You don't destroy the person and drag their name through the mud on the internet all day long. If they did something wrong, you say they own up to it, you move on. Herod with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, dressed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate became friends with one another that very day. Gosh, isn't that special? Right? Right? Bonding over the killing of an innocent man before they'd been enemies. Pilate summoned the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and he said to them, "You brought this man to me as one who incites the people to rebellion, but behold, having examined him before you, I have found no guilt in this man regarding the charges which you make against him. Nor has Herod, for he sent him back to us. And behold, nothing deserving death has been done by him. Therefore, I will punish him and release him." But they cried out together, saying, "Away with this man, release for us Barabbas, the murderer." Pilate, wanting to release Yeshua, addressed them again, but they kept on crying out, saying, "Crucify him, crucify him." And he says, "What evil has he done? I found in him no guilt demanding death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him." But they were insistent. Their loud voices asking that he be crucified. Pilate pronounced sentence and their demand was granted. And he released the man they were asking for, who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, and he delivered Yeshua to his will. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. This man, who knew what to do, did the opposite. Yeah. That's really the pinnacle of today's teaching, by the way. You guys have any comments or no? No. You shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not follow the masses in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. Sad, but we have an example of this happening, and it's the crucifixion of our Messiah. You cannot be partial to a poor man in a dispute. The Bible says it both ways, right? You can't be partial to a poor man, nor can you be partial to a rich man. So the scales of justice we have with the blindfold on it is, even though that's not a biblical image, is a biblical principle. You're supposed to judge things impartially, irrespective of whether the person in front of you is very wealthy or the person in front of you is very poor. What do we see in our country today? Prisons full of poor people, rich people, shooting people and getting away with it. Okay? It's a very upside down world. We're not supposed to judge that way. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying helpless under its load, you shall refrain from leaving it to him, and you shall surely release it. Right? What does Yeshua say? To be kind to your enemies, because you'll put coals on their heads. This is, if you have an enemy and his donkey's out, give him a donkey, get it back to him. Odds are he's probably not going to be your enemy anymore. And if he is, he's going to be sore about it, right? You shall not pervert the justice due to your needy brother in his dispute. Said that twice. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not acquit the guilty. The Sanhedrin. You shall not take, oh, go ahead, Everett. Sorry, I was on a roll.
Yeah. Yeah. This seeing your neighbor's donkey, having a problem and helping him. This is how you make peace with your neighbor, peace with an enemy, is you do something to help the person, and he hopefully will realize, you're not such a bad guy after all, and maybe make peace with you. So this is how a fundamental way of how to create a positive atmosphere.
Yeah. One of the definitions of ethics is doing the right thing when nobody's watching,
Yeah.
right? So you see the donkey needs help. It's not the donkey's fault that you got a beef with his owner, right? The donkey's hurting. You help the donkey or you return the donkey, right? And in that, you've done right in the eyes of God, but you've also done right in the eyes of your neighbor. So even if the guy still doesn't like you, now he owes you one, right? Right. So if he sees you needing some help, he's gonna feel like a twinge, you know. Don't take in a bribe, Judas. You shall not oppress. And this is the thing about the bribe, is when he went to give it back, they knew they paid him a bribe to kill the guy. They said, we can't take this blood money, as if they didn't do it, right? And so he went and bought a field with it. Yea, the field of blood. You shall not oppress a stranger, since you yourselves know that feelings of a stranger, for you were also strangers in the land of Egypt. Do unto others the way you would have them do unto you. If you've had a bad time with something, try to work to help others to not have that bad time. It's just common sense, just kindness. You shall sow your land for 6 years and gather its yield, but on the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, so that the needy of your people may eat, and whatever they leave the beast of the field may eat. Whatever they leave, the beast of the field may eat. You are to do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from your labor, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female slave as well as your stranger may refresh themselves. This 6-day and 6-year pattern is supposed to be our foundation, that we work 6 days, we rest the 7th, we sow 6 years, we rest the 7th. Then it parallels up to society, the world having 6,000 years, 1,000-year break from Satan, and then we enter the Olam Haba. This pattern is supposed to be our society's foundation, to where we do it without even thinking, right? The way we tell time today, right? The way we tell time today, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. We're supposed to know, it's not, it's 2:30, but we're supposed to know this 6-day cycle and the 6-year cycle for the Jubilee, and the 49-year cycle for the big Jubilee. We're supposed to know that by heart. And that's why the slaves get the 6-year treatment. Everybody gets this 6-year treatment. The land lying fallow. Did I read that one? Yeah, it rejuvenates the land, but it also lets the needy people go out and harvest food and have some dignity, right? It gives them a year of, maybe they get enough to where they can get out of poverty, and they don't have to go begging, and they don't have to go, being like that. And the beasts and everybody get to go and eat and relax, and the ground gets a rest. And our society doesn't do that. Our society is 24/7, 365. Boom, 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 boom. Squeeze everything you can out of every mile out of your gallon of gas, every seed out of a field, every drop of anything. We just squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it. But then you pop, and then they had the Dust Bowl. That's when the mankind, or the Americans, were overproducing the land and ended up not getting food for like 10 years, and having the entire, all the fields in the West turned to dust, and you could see the dust clouds in the East Coast. We're not supposed to work like that. We're supposed to take it easy and rest, just the way our Creator did on the 7th day. 6 days, everybody gets a rest on the Sabbath. The donkey, son of your slave, your stranger, everybody gets the day off. Can can you wait to see when all mankind does that? You know, everybody's all like upset with us doing this and think we're foolish or what. If they would just do it a couple of times, golly, we got together with our friends and had another sandwich. Such a chore. I mean, I can't believe we do that another week, right? It's a blessing. Setting aside time for your family, your congregation, and Yahweh, and getting together to share a meal. I don't see a downside. I'm sorry. 3 times a year you shall celebrate a feast. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of the harvest at the ingathering, and 3 times a year all your males shall appear before Yahweh Elohim.
Are you gonna read verse 13?
Oh, maybe. Okay. Yeah, don't mention the name of other gods or let them be heard from your mouth. Sure. I even have notes on that one. Why? You want to say something?
I just remember that from David mentions it a couple of times in Psalms. And there's more I could say. I'll stop.
All right. Why? Why stop? Right?
Well, okay, since you're asking, the days of the week, when my daughter was little, she's much older now, but when she was little, she couldn't remember the days of the week. And so we started calling them one night, one day, 2 night, 2 day, 3 night, 3 day, and so on. And then due to an experience that I had about just over a year ago, I started doing the same thing again. And because I was wondering, with the days of the week, they are the names of other gods. Now, not not Sunday, Monday, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday are all names of other gods. And I backslid from calling them their numbers again, but it is one of those things that's kind of it's niggling in the back of my head. I'll just share that.
So yeah, and Sunday is named after the Deus Solis, the day of the invincible sun. It is my note. Don't even speak the names of other gods. How bad teaching creeps in. Today we have to teach about the false gods because they were allowed to be mixed in. We have to tell people where sun worship came from and how to separate from the false gods because so many follow unknowingly. Gloria has a point. This is baked into everything we do today. It's just part of our society is just mixed up like that. And so we come out of Babylon and we have to start whittling away at it. I was reading the Richard Rives books and reading the 2 Babylons and realizing that everything we do is some kind of a pagan orientation. And then you have to come to a point where you realize that there are some things that are coincidences, right? Some people are the same. But not speaking the names of the other gods, because Israel did it, and because of our current situation, we have to learn it so we can unlearn it, if that makes any sense, right? Because for my own walk, when I said, okay, Sabbath instead of Sunday, okay, we're not supposed to be doing Christmas, we're not supposed to be doing Easter, we're not supposed to be doing this, we're not supposed to be doing that. Where did it come from? So then I delve into that and I'm like, oh my gosh, it all came from other religions. And you have to start getting rid of it. But Everett, go ahead.
Yeah, there's only a certain amount we can do. I mean, we do speak English, and yeah, a lot of stuff comes out of paganism. But is it a sin to speak the English language? I don't think so. But we need to be aware of those things. But like when I say Wednesday, I really don't think about Woden.
Oh, is that the one that it came from? I didn't know.
Yeah, that's my understanding anyway. But yeah, we've moved on to a degree. But in order to communicate, we do it in English, and it is what it is. God's going to give us a pure language at some point in time and clean up all this stuff. But in the meantime, what does he say? With staggering tongue and foreign language, I will speak to you. That communication can take place to glorify God, even in a tongue that maybe isn't perfect or pure.
Yeah. And I wish that the New Testament was written with the word Yeshua and with Yahweh instead. But they used the Greek. They used the Greek in the New Testament, which makes it very hard for people like us to get our points across, because we're two languages removed, not just one. Go ahead.
Well, and also part of that might be the worshiping of other gods, because just saying their name, we're not given any power in that. We're not worshiping them, not idolizing them. So just saying their name is one thing other than just worshiping them.
So I hesitate to say that this one isn't literal, because it is literal and has a literal application. And that's one of my rules, is if something can be literal, it has to be. But he's saying to obliterate them so that they've never existed. That was the intention of Israel entering the land of Canaan, was to blot out all of it, and start fresh. And they didn't accomplish that, obviously. But in the millennium, we are going to accomplish that. There will never be a thought of a foreign God, any such thing. It's all going to be gone, right?
Yeah, which is nice, but now it's not like that. Like, you wear Nikes and that's a Greek goddess name. Like, that's, so you have these gods that we don't even know they're gods technically, that we're wearing or saying and seeing. So to get away from it 100% is not really possible right now.
And the Mazda car
Yeah, I mean,
is named after Ahura Mazda. I would never buy one, by the way. Right? Yeah.
but I'm just saying, you may or may not know that,
Yeah.
and you may own a Mazda, but you're not worshiping that car. You're not worshiping that God. You're not given any power to it. But in our world and our society we live in, there's paganism everywhere. So,
Gloria?
The thing is, whenever we speak the name, we are giving it power. That's the way the gods work. And that's why we're to have no other gods besides the true God. And we don't understand it because it is so ubiquitous to our current situation. When Moses was at the burning bush, he says, what's your name so that I can tell them? Because to the Egyptians, if they knew the name of the God, then they could control the God. At least that's my understanding of it. And that's why God spoke what he did. He says, you don't need to know my name. I am. You will not be able to control me or use my name in a wrong way, because I'm not going to give you that power.
So he kind of did tell him his name there. In Hebrew, he didn't say ani, which is I am. He said haya asher haya, means I exist. I have no beginning and I have no end. And so the name Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, is derived from what he told Moses at the bush. Yeah, it's from the verb to be. So he says haya asher haya, meaning I am so powerful and so big and so self-existent that you can't possibly fathom it. And so Gloria's right, and I'm adding to it, is he's just stomping on them, saying, you don't even know what you're talking about. Later, in Exodus 20, once he has all their attention, right, with the mixed multitude, he comes down on the mountain and says, I am Yahweh your Elohim. You shall have no other Elohim before me. He does give him the name and tells him that you never take my name in vain. But we are supposed to know that name. That was a couple weeks ago. Flashback. So the 3 festivals and the 3 times a year your male shall appear before Yahweh. Good. no blood with my sacrifice, with leavened bread, nor is the fat of my feast to remain overnight. And you shall bring the choice first fruits of your soil into the house of the Lord your God. You are not to boil a young goat in the milk of its mother. Oof. Behold, I'm going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way and bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on your guard before him and obey his voice. Do not be rebellious towards him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. But if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. My angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Canaanite, the Hivite, Jebusite, and I will completely destroy them. So who do we think the angel is? Right? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? I mean, Paul says the rock was Christ, right? So probably the Messiah standing there guiding the way for them. Everett?
He's also known as the Logos, which could be interpreted the spokesman.
Yep.
So he spoke for his father, if you will. Yeah.
Yep. The mediator, always the mediator. You shall not worship their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds. You shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars into pieces. But you shall serve Yahweh your Elohim, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. I know works don't save you, but works can absolutely condemn you, right? And he's telling them, this is it. Here's the deal. You're going to go and you're going to take these people out, and you are to get rid of all of their stuff, all of their worship stuff. They blot them out completely. And if you do this, no miscarrying, there's going to throw the enemies into confusion, hornets ahead of you. They're going to eat great. They're going to have a really good land, really good time of it. They just couldn't do it for whatever reason. For whatever reason, they just kept backsliding. It was the first battle was Jericho, right? When they crossed over and somebody grabbed some of the gold, somebody grabbed an idol and brought it back, and it caused 12,000 people to die. They just couldn't do it. And it's terrible. And he says, I'll not drive them out in a single year, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field too numerous for you. So Yahweh has made a decision. We've gone through this several times now, where he has made a decision to do something, to execute people, to execute judgment or whatever, years before it actually happens. So these Canaanites are completely condemned, but he's only going to drive them out little by little so that Israel can take over land and cultivate it without it becoming too big of a hassle. A little morbid, but he has a plan. Yahweh's management style. I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand and will drive them out from before you. Tools, graphics viewer. What are you hiding over there for? Make it big. So what they were supposed to get was from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea to the Euphrates. It's actually about the size of Australia is what they were supposed to get. What did they get? This little bitty area over here. They didn't get the huge area. Where do we think that headquarters is going to be during the millennium? The actual land that was promised to Abraham. And because there's going to be hundreds of millions of people there. There's going to be so many people, and it's going to grow for 1,000 years. So it's going to be a huge area, and probably restored and fertile as well. So you shall make no covenant with them or with their gods, and they will not live in your land, because they will make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it'll be a snare to you. Well, we know what happened, and what Gloria was talking about. we know that we're coming to the truth in Babylon. We live in the land that's all mixed up. And I think that we've been on autopilot. I don't think Satan has to do that much. I think the thoughts of men are wicked, constantly. So, all right. So, Exodus 24. Then he's 24 to what? I think 18. All right. Yeah. Almost there. So, he said to Moses, "Come up to Yahweh, you and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and the 70 elders of Israel, and you shall worship at a distance. Moses alone, however, shall come up near to Yahweh, but they shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him." Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice, said, "All the words which Yahweh has spoken, we will do." If only they did it. Moses wrote down all the words of Yahweh, and he arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings. So who makes the first offering? Levites or everybody? This is Everett's wheelhouse, right? Right? There is no Levitical priesthood set up right here. Right here, the men were supposed to do it on their own, and they did do it on their own. And that's the way it was intended. The golden calf broke this system. It wasn't going to be nearly as complex of a system. Well, I mean, it was, because Yahweh knows the beginning from the end, right? But the intention was pretty cinchy. And anyway, Moses took half the blood and put it in basins. The other half he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant, read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, "All that Yahweh has spoken, we will do, and we will be obedient." Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, "Behold, the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you in accordance with all these words." Then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. What? They did what? Always confusing on this one, because sometimes the Bible says they see God, and sometimes it says it's impossible. Everett?
Well, of course, looking on God is kind of irrelevant as far as physical goes, but the mentality behind him was, of course, in his spokesman. That was probably the one that stood on the mountain and spoke those words. And that was important enough that fulfilled, I think, the need for that. But what I really wanted to comment on was the purpose of that altar again. They were to be a nation of priests to God, with an altar of stone or earth or uncut stone. You could make one of those anywhere. So they could go pretty much anywhere in the world and invoke the Creator and show his power and ability to meet and connect. He promised to come to them to connect with people all around the world if they had fulfilled that responsibility.
And this is the blood of the covenant. And Yeshua says his body was the blood of the new covenant. So it does make sense. I'm just moving on. I had nothing to disagree with there, right? Right, right. And so so it makes perfect sense for Yeshua to be this being here. And the pavement of sapphire. If you have a wristwatch, the lenses of wristwatches today are almost all sapphire. So if you imagine a perfect, clear pavement that he's standing on, something you would just blow your mind. That is perfect. And sapphire is used in medical instrumentation, whatever, because it doesn't refract light. It's a straight pass through. So it's interesting that they know that, right? That he knows right here, that the author knows that that this sapphire is as clear as the sky itself, because it is, and it's kind of a nifty thing. And he didn't stretch out his hand against the nobles of the sons of Israel. They saw God, they ate and drank. Yahweh said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and remain there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction." So Moses arose with Joshua his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. But to the elders he said, "You wait here till we return. Behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a legal matter, let him approach them." Then Moses went up to the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the glory of Yahweh rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the seventh day, he called Moses from the midst of the cloud. And to the eyes of the sons of Israel, the appearance of the glory of Yahweh was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop. Moses entered the midst of the cloud as he went up to the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Yep. That's the end of today, by the way. Any more comments? Sounds like the kids have comments. Oh, Everett, you're on mute, buddy.
Yeah, there's an interesting scripture in Hebrews 7 that I had up here just a second ago. That basically says that what purpose, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for upon it, that basis, the law was enacted. What use is another priesthood? In what we've just read, what does that have to do with the Levitical priesthood?
Oh, well, it doesn't, because it wasn't set up yet.
Yeah, exactly. But but Hebrews is saying that the law was under the Levitical priesthood. So as far as Hebrews is concerned, it's not talking about this law, it's talking about a different law.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I get it. I've I understand where you're coming from for
Yeah.
years. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Because what happens is Moses goes up, and while he's up there, Aaron was just given authority, and he was halfway up the mountain. We watched a presentation from a guy who went, and these places still exist in Saudi Arabia, and he went on a tour and went to where the elders were before you go up to Mount Sinai. And her were at an elevated place over the people, and the people come up to Aaron at that spot telling him to make a golden calf. So he almost instantly misuses his authority, and then the Levitical priesthood comes up after that, right? Is that where you're going with it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and specifically in Deuteronomy 31:24, it says that Moses wrote these words, put them in a book, and he wrote this law, and he put it in a book and gave it to the Levites, and they set it next to the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. That seems to be the law that Hebrews is talking about.
Yeah,
What
all right.
Moses wrote with Deuteronomy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on that? Silence is deafening. Okay, then that's where we're going to close it then.